copies of these documents. My agents travelled freely throughout Airstrip 1, encouraging insurrection and organising a massive counterplot to destroy the innermost faction of the Oceanian leadership. Furthermore, I used my position of privilege within the inner party to promote and iterate the truth at all times, and to suggest wherever possible that our traditional allies in East Asia were in fact our dead enemies.
April the 4th, 1984.
In my position as chief factor in planning,
I think.
I stole military plans and at vast financial profit sold them to the invasion leadership.
To the past.
I was
Or to the future.
the attempt to subvert,
To an age when thought is free.
and so I became open
From the age of Big Brother. From the age of the thought police.
to his direction. I assassinated a number
From a dead man.
of organizing full service
Greetings.
So you can kind of see how he's found a place that's outside the view of the two-way telescreen with which the government watches him. So I'll leave you with that, and certainly if you have any questions, just let me know. Raise your hand, or you can email me or see me later for coffee and ice cream.
So, you see a lot of people in the hacker scene who are working on these tools that are designed, to provide anonymity, to help support, state firewalls and that sort of thing. And I guess I get the perception that you have a bunch of guys at conferences like this they live in the West, and they don't necessarily have direct experiences with the sort of threat models that are based by the people that live in some of these states and the actual resources that they have available. And so I guess my question is, is your understanding that people in these things are using a lot of the tools that are coming out of the case where people in this community are making tools that people in these countries are ignoring?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So he's asking, right, are people using these tools that sort of the freedom of information folks are creating in the West? Well, in China, like I said, they just said that, they announced that this would be the year of a repurification of the internet. They couldn't keep up, right? They couldn't keep up with the tools. And I mean, I've like Freegate, for instance. Somebody really wanted me to create a site on Freegate for this briefing for China, saying that, that's allowing, free access to the internet from the PRC. It's hard to say. I mean, but the Saudi officials too, they've said, look, we just can't keep up with this stuff. It's changing all the time and it's too quick for us. And like I said, everybody there are just getting satellite access and they're pointing their satellites somewhere and the government's saying, go on and do it. I think maybe the cases of Belarus and Iran are pretty interesting in that they really seem to be fairly selective. They have the capability. They're allowing a lot of stuff through. They're allowing a lot of some freedom on the part of people, regular people. But it appears that they've got the power to use it when they want to against selected people, and that would probably be true for most governments on Earth, right? I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, some of these, there's a real wide variety of countries in this briefing. Some of them, they just need a good meal. They need there's a lot more potentially than they need than internet access. But I think internet access is indicative, perhaps, of what freedom is like in these countries and other areas of life. And so it's important to look at. But I know that in Saudi Arabia and in China in particular, both of them have said it's extremely difficult for them to keep up. Now, in Cuba, I just don't think people have the connections to the internet. They just don't have them. And of course, Turkmenistan too. They don't have connection to the internet. So they're probably not using the tools. Of the countries that I've looked at, I would say probably China is a well-known case. Probably Belarus. I'd like to dig more deeply there because, again, you have a lot of infrastructure and you have a fairly sophisticated population. And that just appears to be selective at times, and they've just kind of shut down the whole net going into and in and out of the capital, So, it's hard to say. But I think that it's really worthwhile what these people are doing, especially, if they've got noble reasons for it. Part of the problem, though, I've heard people say this too, that with a siphon tool, somebody I think sent me an article, a couple months ago saying, yeah, they're using it in China. They're using it to surf porn. So you can't win, right? All of a sudden you say, well, I developed this tool, and it's essentially not, they're not using it for the purpose I had intended. But that's no reason not to sort of soldier on and try and do the right thing either. Any other questions?
Are there any studies that are likely to indicate at what point the government just gives up on the block? Because they're going to have government officials who, let's face it, aren't necessarily the most creative individuals on the planet, and they're trying to block things, and they have people basically everywhere else in the world, like the BlackHat and underground hacker groups, who are trying to help get past the Great Firewall and similar structures. At what point do they say, you know what, we don't have enough fingers to sting in the dike, we're just going to let it happen?
Right. Well, I think that even in this case study, I think that the bottom 5 are a lot different than the top 5. They seem to be much tougher nuts, really, to crack. I think that the case of the Mira group in Saudi Arabia, at least from what I know, eventually they just gave up. And because this group, they just kept at it. Like they would change their ports, they would change the URLs, and they tried everything. And the government was like, screw it, we're going to let this stuff in. And also, like I said, certain things are easier than others. Pornography seems to be easier. Like the Saudi officials said that they felt like they were near 100% successful in stopping pornography. I can't quite imagine that could be true, but at least what comes through their system. It's funny. I think each one of these case studies probably is vastly different from the other. And I'm not a super expert on any of them. But like with China, I would think once you get so much infrastructure. But China is different than, I guess, in that it has, like I said, an army of public and private personnel whose only job it is to maintain the system. But in some countries where they have such little amount of infrastructure, perhaps like in Cuba says, nobody's going to have computers, nobody's going to have an internet connection. It's only going to be state period. Otherwise, forget it. Otherwise, you're going to jail. That's pretty blanket, But when you have a lot of infrastructure, and if you would allow, say, the majority of your people to connect to the internet, I think you're probably lost at that point. You know what I mean? And that may be one reason why China is struggling this year to figure out how it's going to maintain control over the internet, because there's so much infrastructure. People are so educated. People are so focused on probably getting information. In and out of the country. The task is probably monumental. I'm trying to think of other examples, but if you take Belarus, for instance, it appears to be very selective, so the government may not be able to do it all the time. And then they may not be very good at doing it selectively, perhaps like in China. But it looked like in Belarus, they just said, okay, during elections, during referendums, we're just going to shut the net off. Nobody's going to connect. That's kind of stupid, right? It doesn't seem like it would be effective to me or work, and it just seems like it's probably counterproductive to your cause. And much more interesting, I think, are the cases in which you have blogs edited and pages within, seemingly same content that are gone. That's indicative of a pretty sophisticated apparatus. And so we've seen that both in China and Iran. And I think from what I've seen, those are the 2 countries that have been selling it the most to the little brothers of the world. Those 2 countries are sort of advising. They're out there selling and advising this stuff. I think maybe they're the 2 most sophisticated censoring governments. Right? Anyone else? Well, thank you very, very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And again, you can always get in touch with me. It's pretty easy, so just let me know. Thanks.